He was my world. I remember the early years of our marriage like scenes from an old movie, summer evenings on the porch, the smell of barbecue and freshly cut grass, sitting on a wooden swing and dreaming about the future. We talked about a house with a white porch, a big dog, children we didn't have yet but already loved in our fantasies. I was sure that our marriage was forever, that we would go through everything together. He was witty, kind, attentive. I remember once in winter he brought home coffee with a small chocolate bar, just because he saw that I was sad. These small gestures made him the hero of my days. I felt that I could trust him more than anyone else in the world. But behind all that warmth was something I couldn't see at the time. We lived as if in an American Idol. We had a house in the suburbs, a cozy kitchen with a large island. We went to the lake on weekends. We always laughed and took pictures on our travels. Everything around us seemed right, like in movies about happy families. I pretended that everything was perfect, and to be honest, I liked it. Sometimes, lying in bed at night and listening to his breathing, I thought that this was everything I could dream of. I even wrote little notes in my diary, noting how he smiled, how his eyes lit up when he told funny stories about work. I felt like the happiest woman in the world. It is precisely when you believe that everything is perfect that fate begins to throw its first surprises. But I didn't know that then. I just enjoyed the feeling of security, warmth, and love, thinking that our story would be eternal, like the old movies we watched together in the evenings. I will never forget the day I learned the truth. It all started with a routine notification on my phone, a message that at first seemed insignificant to me. But then I saw the photos, and my heart seemed to stop. He was cheating on me. My body went limp, my breathing became ragged, and my mind tried to find an explanation that did not exist. I sat in the kitchen, holding my phone, unable to believe my eyes. Every image, every word in the messages felt like a knife in my back. We lived in a house we had built together, laughed on the same kitchen tiles where I now clutched my phone, tears rolling down my cheeks. This house felt foreign to me. I remembered all our happy moments and tried to connect them with what I saw. How could he? Why? Scenes from our life played over and over in my head, and each one was now tainted with betrayal. I remembered parties with friends, quiet dinners together, those moments when he held my hand and promised that I was the only one. It was all a lie. The American dream we lived in suddenly turned into an illusion. That house with the white porch, the dog on the lawn, morning coffee together, all of it now seemed like a mask hiding reality. At that moment, I felt not only pain, but also a terrible emptiness. I didn't scream or make a scene, I just sat there, feeling the world around me collapse. My resentment was both sharp and icy. I understood that my life would never be the same again. And somewhere deep inside, a thought began to form that I didn't want to admit. If he can betray me, maybe I can too. I knew that this was not just betrayal. It was a blow to the very core of my trust, to the feelings that make life bright and safe. And it was then that I realized that forgiveness would be incredibly difficult and sometimes impossible. After that day, everything around me seemed to change. Our home, which had always seemed warm and alive to me, suddenly turned into a backdrop, beautiful, well-kept, but cold. He walked around the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, asked if I wanted coffee, talked about his plans for work, and I looked at him and saw a person I no longer knew. His voice sounded the same, his movements were the same, but I felt like he was a stranger. Every morning I sat at the kitchen island, where we used to joke with each other, and now I looked at him through my coffee cup and thought only one thing: how could you? The resentment grew inside me like a snowball. I didn't immediately realize that it wasn't just pain, it was anger that was burning everything inside me. Anger at him for destroying our perfect future. Anger at myself for not noticing it sooner. Anger at this whole beautiful picture of suburban life, which turned out to be fake. He tried to act as if nothing had happened. Sometimes he stayed late after work, sometimes he came in early, as if trying to show that he was domestic and real. But I knew where he had been before, and his every action only added fuel to the fire. I caught myself watching him. I noticed how he took off his shoes at the door, how he left his keys on the hook, how he turned on the TV to watch the news, and in every movement I saw the man who had betrayed me. A feeling arose inside me that I had never considered possible before. Revenge. I never thought I was capable of it. In TV shows or novels, it seemed dramatic, almost ridiculous, but in reality, it felt like something animalistic, primal, like the instinct for self-preservation. I wanted him to understand what he had done. Not just hear it, not just see my tears, but truly feel it. I wanted every cell in his body to realize that his actions had consequences. I noticed that I started talking less. I looked him in the eyes less. Inside, I was building walls. And behind those walls, a firm decision was growing to regain control, to regain power over my own feelings. And at some point, a thought that had previously seemed impossible suddenly became frighteningly logical. If he cheated on me, why shouldn't I do the same? It sat quietly inside me like a seed, but I knew it would sprout. It didn't happen right away. I walked around with this thought in my head for a long time, like a sharp stone in my shoe. It got in the way, caused discomfort, but I kept going because I didn't know what else to do. Revenge seemed wrong to me, something unworthy, but at the same time alluring. It gave me a feeling of power that I so desperately needed after the blow he had dealt me. The first steps were almost innocent. I started paying more attention to myself, my clothes, my makeup, my appearance. Not for him. And not for anyone in particular. Just to feel alive. To regain the feeling that I matter, that I can be desirable, interesting, that my value is not limited to his loyalty or his betrayal. But then he appeared. A man I knew superficially, a colleague, a friend of friends, someone who always smiled at me a little warmer than the others, but never crossed the line. We bumped into each other by chance in a cafe near my work, and that chance encounter clung to me like a sign, like an invitation. He said, "You look tired. Is everything okay?" And at that moment, I wanted to tell him everything, but I couldn't. Instead, I allowed myself to be a different version of myself, one that hadn't been crushed by the weight of betrayal. I smiled, said everything was fine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that I liked the way he looked at me. We started texting each other. At first cautiously, neutrally, then a little warmer. Those messages were like oxygen. I caught myself checking my phone more often than I should have. I wasn't looking for love. I was looking for confirmation that I existed. I struggled with myself for a long time. Every time a message came, a wave of strange, contradictory feelings rose inside me. Shame, anticipation, anxiety, strength. But the more I thought about what my husband had done, the more I realized that he had already broken the rules of our game. He was the first to rewrite the script. When we met again, in the parking lot after work, I realized that the moment of choice had come. He just stood there, looking at me intently, but without pressure. And it suddenly became clear to me, I no longer want to be a victim. I don't want to cry at night. I wanted to regain the feeling that I was in control of my life. And yes, I did it. Not out of love, not out of passion, but out of a need to prove to myself that I could also take the step that he took so easily, without even looking back. But even then, in that moment after it happened, I felt not only victory, but also heaviness. Revenge gave me strength, but it left a dark aftertaste that was impossible to escape. After I took my step, our home turned into a battlefield of invisible war. We both knew that something had changed, even though no one said a word. He walked around the house as he had before, but now I felt that his every movement was carefully calculated. I noticed how he lingered on my hands, on my phone, as if trying to understand what was hidden behind my smile. We both wore masks. He wore the mask of a calm husband who hadn't noticed anything. I wore the mask of a woman who had everything under control. But beneath these masks, feelings raged that were impossible to hide. Resentment, guilt, desire, anger. Every conversation, every glance turned into a duel where no one showed their hand. I began to notice how little things became weapons. He held back his hugs when before he would hug me for no reason. I responded with coldness when before I would laugh. Sometimes we had dinner together, but the silence was louder than any words. A feeling of power grew inside me. I realized that I could cause him the same pain that he had caused me. But with that came a feeling of emptiness. We both lived side by side, but it was as if we were in different worlds. I caught myself watching him as if he were a character in a movie. He comes home late from work, opens the door slowly, as if checking to see if I've noticed anything. I imagined what he thought about me, about our secrets. And the more I imagined, the more I realized that our life was no longer about love, but about psychological strategy. With each passing day, I felt my confidence grow. He no longer had complete control over me. He didn't know that I knew I could hurt him back. We were both playing this game, each thinking we held the cards. But the truth was that neither of us was winning. We were just surviving in this cold, artificially created space. Sometimes at night, when I lay in the dark, I thought I could hear him thinking about me, about his mistakes. And I felt a strange combination of malice and sadness. We both knew that this game could go on forever if neither of us took a step towards the truth. But what was most frightening was that the game gradually became a part of me. I realized that the revenge I had chosen had become a new ritual of our existence. We had both survived the blow, both caused pain, and now each of us lived with it as an invisible chain that bound us more strongly than before. At some point, I realized that we no longer lived together. We simply existed side by side, bound not by love, but by the scars we had inflicted on each other. Outwardly, everything looked almost normal. The house was on the same street. The dogs still ran around the yard. The neighbors continued to smile at us when we went out to get the mail. We still cooked dinner, still discussed bills, plans, work. But inside, everything was dead. I often caught myself looking at him and thinking, how did we end up here? How did two people who dreamed of simple things, a quiet life, family photos, grandchildren, turn into participants in a cold drama? My revenge gave me a sense of control, yes. It allowed me to rise above the betrayal. But along with that power came something else, the realization that by destroying him, I had destroyed a part of myself. Sometimes, when he walked past me in the kitchen and accidentally brushed my shoulder, I felt how distant he had become. Not an enemy, not a stranger, but as if he were a reflection of who he used to be. A shadow of a question appeared in his gaze, one he was afraid to ask. And I was afraid too. We both knew that the truth lay between us like sharp glass. Step on it and you'll cut yourself. There were evenings when we sat on the sofa, far apart, and turned on a TV series just to fill the silence. But the silence still prevailed. And it was the silence that made me think that revenge is not victory. It's a crutch. A way to stay on your feet when you've been knocked down. But when the pain subsides, you realize that you are leaning on something that will not help you move forward. One night, I woke up and saw him sitting on the edge of the bed. He wasn't crying or talking. He was just staring into the darkness in front of him. And at that moment, I realized that he was also living with this burden. That his betrayal had destroyed us both, and mine had finished off what was left. We didn't talk out loud about what we had done to each other. Each of us carried our own truth inside. But the outcome was obvious. We both lost more than we gained. No amount of revenge could bring back the trust, warmth, or sincerity that had once been our foundation. In the end, the most painful thing was to admit that we had destroyed our relationship ourselves. Not circumstances, not other people, not fate. Us. Two adults who once loved each other. And when I look back, I realize that revenge gave me a moment of satisfaction, but left behind a void that turned out to be deeper and darker than the one caused by his betrayal. Sometimes revenge is not the path to freedom, but just another way to lose yourself.